Good day. What you're seeing in front of you here is an example of an After Effects 3D pop-up gallery. Yes, the pictures are popping up and they're done in After Effects, complete with some motion, some rotation, some 3D space, some lighting, and also some shadows for realism. And that's what we're going to do today. The process here is going to be to cover how we take and create a rotation, and that involves moving the anchor or pivot point, and then how we set that into a 3D plane and adjust it so you can have some items that are in front and items that are in back, and also then how you can light it and make sure that you got some realistic looking shadows with hopefully not blowing out the pictures too much. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to bring into After Effects the 8 pictures that you saw in the example right before, well, I started talking here. Wait, I was already talking. Okay, well, anyway, earlier in the video. So I'm just going to drag and drop them all in at the same time, and just make sure that whatever you bring in to After Effects, your media cache is big enough so that you can support, especially if you have some larger files, like maybe bringing in some PSDs. Okay, so what I'm going to do for each of these PSDs is they're pretty large. I am going to take and make the individual animations for each of those. So when I do that, I don't really want them to be quite as big as the 3,000 pixels across that some of them are. And I'm thinking to myself, do I really need to make them 4,000 pixels? The answer is no. You can if you want, but I'm just going to go ahead and resize them all down. I know my final composition is looking at HD. If you're looking at 4K, then yeah, you could go ahead and do something at 4K if you want, but I know my finished version is going to be HD, so I'm going to say new composition, and I'm just going to use the stock settings for high def. If I wanted to use the new composition from the footage size, I could if I felt like it, but if I resize them down now, I think it's going to make it a little bit easier for myself. I am going to change the time though, since my ending result is going to be 20 seconds long. I definitely want to make that into the 20-second mark. And everything else is going to be stock. I'll just go ahead and say OK. So each of these pictures, I'm just going to go ahead and drag one in, are going to be either cutouts or stills from a vacation from a long time ago. And what I'm going to do is scale them down so that they fit the picture that I have. I'm going to make this to fit the size and then adjust the scale properly. All right, so there are a process that I want to follow, and this is going to be for each of the individual images. The first process is that I want this to pop up by following along the base or the bottom of my image. And so in order to do that, I'm going to need to adjust where the rotation point is. There are multiple ways to adjust the rotation point. You can, while you're in this window right here, just go ahead and use the anchor point and adjust it that way. You can also do what I like to do. I like to actually click and drag that thing, and in order to be able to click and drag your anchor point, you have to double click on the image to get it into the isolation layer. That then allows you to take and click and drag the anchor point. There's no real reason that's good or bad. I eyeball this because it's going to be in motion anyway, and there's a good chance the bottom's going to be sticking out of the ground, so it's not a biggie. Be careful about the placement. Just making sure that it's somewhere close to the bottom. If you are thinking about why did we do that, well, we did that so that we can get the rotation happening, like what you saw at the beginning of the lecture. To do the rotation, well, once I turn on the 3D layer, I have the ability to do a rotation, which in my case is going to be taking an X rotation, and I am going to click and hold the mouse down on the double zeros next to the X rotation, and I'm going to drag left and show you slowly dropping the clip down to lay on its back. Now, what's my actual number going to be? Minus 90 degrees, and that is going to have it lay on its back. Do I need to adjust the up and down? The answer is no. What you're doing is just the rotation. And what you do need to adjust is when is this going to pop up. Now I'm going to follow the order that I have here on these placements. So each of these images are going to be in the particular order. So over the space of 20 seconds, I want each one to pop up pretty much, well, every 2 seconds. And so this first one is going to pop up somewhere right toward the beginning, not exactly at the beginning, so I'm going to start my animation. So I'm going to turn on a keyframe for the X rotation, and then probably about a third of a second later, maybe fourth of a second, I'm going to set this value back to 0, and that is the pop-up. And you just want to make sure that you don't go over the top. See how my Windsor looks a little tall there? Well, maybe I'll just take and use the position and pull it down. Since I already adjusted the anchor, all of the keyframes will come along with it. Now, that's all you have to do. Realistically, that is going to be for one of the compositions. The smart thing, though, would be is instead of just calling this comp 1, it might be smart to rename this as pick 1, because you're going to have a different picture for each of your items. And so naming them, not a bad idea, so you'll kind of know the order that they go in. Such as my second picture, which right there is a picture of Big Ben. And I am going to make a new composition and maybe name this before I even start. Pick 2, go ahead, and everything is going to remember the settings that I had there. I'm going to take and drag Big Ben into my image. It's really large, and Big Ben, yes. Well, my picture is really large too, but you know, and it's kind of also bent a little bit. You know, I was in England. They got really good beer there, and pretty much all my pictures are kind of bent a little bit, because that's usually what I'm getting when I'm over there. Bent. And by the way, Big Ben, this is being recorded in 2018, and I don't think you'll be able to see Big Ben for a couple, 3 years. Okay, it's getting a facelift. Why? You know, I don't know. Sometimes it needed it. It's better to get a facelift than liposuction. Back to my thing, I am going to take and double click it, move the pivot point down to the bottom, and close up this, double clicking to isolate the layer, and just kind of get it setting there. And like before, turn on my 3D layer, and I'm going to go ahead and do a quick little rotation on the X, which is a minus 90 to flop it back there. And since my first one popped up at about the half-second mark, this is going to pop up at about the 2.5-second mark, because I'm going to do about 2 seconds every picture. Why? Because that way they're all done by the 16-second mark, and I don't have to be exact on that one. So I'll have it start at about 2.5 seconds and end maybe just slightly before 3. And when I say end, I mean pop up like that. And I can scrub this to see my animation. And if you want it to pop up faster, you just have, well, shorter distance between your keyframes. Okay, so what I'm going to do is bring up one more point that you have to do when you're working on this, and that is inside your material options. Inside your material options, you want to make sure that by default your layers or the pop-up casts a shadow. It's set to off. You want to change that to be on. And I should have done that back on the first layer also. Go into the, when I say first layer, I mean the first picture. Go into the material options and click on the on button to make sure that it definitely casts a shadow, because you want to have shadows. That's just kind of a no-brainer on that one. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip ahead to a saved version that has all 8 of my pictures already done, because you don't need to see me do 6 more. And I will be turning on the lights for all of them, and then we'll talk about creating the entire base platform. So I have the file that I originally created, and you can see I actually zapped a few things out of there. Why? Because, well, I'm going to show you how to do the major platform. And I've got the pictures. I will mention one thing that I did on 7. Instead of having just 2 keyframes, I actually have multiple keyframes. I made this, let's zoom in on the keyframes so you can see them. I made it so that it pops up, but then it kind of warbles a little bit forward, then a little bit back, then a little bit forward, then a little bit back, then a little bit forward. And each one, it goes like forward 10 degrees, back 10 degrees, forward 5 degrees, back 5 or 2 degrees, and then stops at 0. So it's got a little warble. And yeah, those of you that know expressions, yeah, I know you could do it with an expression, but okay, such as bees. And when I brought stuff in, before I paused it, I realized that, oops, I actually forgot the Camden picture. Boop, can't miss that. Okay, because gosh knows that UK people always send foreigners to Camden to buy their junk. Just like, we always send people to our swap meets to buy our junk. Yeah. So let's talk about doing the bottom platform. So I have a picture that I am going to drag in. That is an English castle. That is going to be my bottom plate. All right, there it is. So this picture is 4,700 pixels across, and it's more than enough to give me a nice little stretch of time. So what I'm going to do with this picture is I'm going to make a new composition from this image. And so that way I have the English castle, and it's 4,700 pixels across. Well, wait a sec. I thought you said we're doing high definition. We are. But we are going to use this as our tabletop to put all of the individual pictures on. But it's not a tabletop, it's a picture. It's going to be a tabletop as soon as I turn it into 3D and take the transform and rotate this back to a minus 90 degrees. Now, this one is not going to, it looks like it just disappeared. It didn't. It is actually just sitting in the middle. So I did not adjust the anchor point on this one. So I am going to the position, and I'm going to lower the position down just a little bit. Yeah, just like that. And that's my tabletop. All right. Now that is going to be, it looks like it's going to have a lot of ugly headroom, but that's okay, because what we're going to do is we're going to load in a camera and use that camera to kind of do an adjustment for, well, making sure that we got a high definition output. So I am going to take and making sure that in this case, my material options, I don't have to worry about it casting a shadow. I just want to make sure it accepts shadows. This is on by default, but it's something that you might just want to double check. So what's going to go here? Each of your pictures. Now the pictures are going to be a little large, and so when you place them down, they're also not going to place exactly as correct as you want them to. So you don't necessarily have to worry about headroom, but what you have to do is you have to worry about the fact that you're bringing a 3D animation into a 3D layer. What's that mean? Well, After Effects isn't really a 3D program. It's a 2D, 2.5D program that interpolates stuff. So if you have one 3D animation that you want to bring into another 3D animation, and you want to make sure that such in the case is my stop sign kind of pops up where it's supposed to be, in order for the layers to react to each other correctly, I have to make sure that on pick one I click the collapse transformation button. In short, that's pretty much just telling After Effects that, hey, because if you bring something in, it treats it as flat. Again, 2D animation. But if you put in the collapse transformation, it tells After Effects, hey, look inside that. See what it is. Okay, look deeper into its eyes. So after you check the transformation button, you can take and adjust that as you wish. I'm going to go open the transform window. By the way, I'm not using any shortcuts, and so if you're a shortcut person, transformation is open up the P button, and so you can adjust the position, and I'm going to go ahead and raise it and lower it, and I don't want to lower it too far because I want to kind of get it into my picture. Now if I want to move this left or right, it's easy. I could just move it left or right. All right, but if I want to move it front and back, I got to turn on the 3D channel. All right, so it's going to be kind of okay right there. When I start putting in some lights, I'm going to find that I will have to actually turn on the 3D channel. Okay, so if I want to have lights and shadows, I'm going to need that. So I'm going to go ahead and check it right now. So what I'm going to do is when I place the second one, I'll find it's pretty huge in terms of the collapse transformation. Boom. Tall, and it looks like it kind of completely went away. So I'm going to press the letter P, bring up my position, and I'm going to go left and right, and it's not look like it's well, wait a sec. I clapped transformation. Oh, this is a case where I definitely want to turn on the 3D button so I can raise it and lower it. See, there you go. And I'm going to adjust that kind of here. And maybe what I'm thinking about doing is I will probably push this one a little bit toward the back, and I'm going to take this very first one and pull it a little bit to the front. And I'm okay with having a little bit of an overlap. Okay? And that's what you do. You get them all lined up, and this is where you can check your timing. Depends upon how your computer scrubs. It may, as long as it's kind of one after each other, and as long as you remember to go pick one, pick two, pick three in order, and how you place them on there is just turning on collapse transformation. Turn on 3D for later. If you don't like to use the arrows, for selections, pressing the letter P opens up the positions. Yeah, you can just open it by hand, and you can adjust it like that. Now, one thing I will also mention is that some of these pictures are going to be a little bit too big. Okay, they're going to be way too big. You'll never get all the pictures on there at the same time. All right, but what if they overlap each other? Well, you don't want to. I mean, maybe I suppose you could have them overlap a little bit. The smarter way would just be to make it fit on the page. How would you do that? Well, that's where you'd open up the scale button. Pressing the S on a layer opens up scale, and then I could reduce that down just a little teeny bit to make it fit. All right, and why would I say it in such a high-pitched voice? Because it's smaller now, which means this windpipe is smaller, which means it talks like this. Yeah, I'm not going to do that anymore. That's really weird. If you are thinking to yourself, okay, well, wait, I just want to get the thing, the full menu back. Just press S again to close scale and just open up the transformation, and that'll put you right back to where it's at. The position that you're sitting at in the X, Y, and Z is really going to be just kind of up to your eyeball. Okay, if you want the picture floating a little bit above the ground, you're more than welcome to have it floating a little bit above the ground. If the scale doesn't match quite right, when you turn the scale down and just scrub it to see where it sits, and then you find out if you like it or not. And if you want a picture to move forward, adjust that with the Z position, and that is something that is strictly going to be to taste. Okay, so I've placed 3 images, and what I'm going to do is I'll pause this recording, and I'll either load back the original one that I did, or maybe I'll just paste these down, and no, I'll load back the original one. So here's the final version that I had for all of the pop-ups, and I'm scrubbing them, and that's it. It's laid out okay. So here's something when you're doing the layout. I am going to point out that you have the ability to change the camera view when we add a camera in here. And so right now, if you try and change the camera view, like if you click from the top down, you might have to adjust the screen just a little bit. But you will be able to see kind of how things are laid out. And so if you have things that are overlapping each other and you want to make an adjustment on that, that's not a bad place to do so. When you're all done adjusting, just go back and select Active Camera, and that'll put you right back to your basic screenshot. That little adjustment that you can make from the top also gives you the ability to change custom views. And so you can kind of see what it looks like from a side view. And depends on the RAM in your machine. Yeah. Now, why do I care about these custom views? Well, before I put the camera in, I need to put some lights because I want to light this up because this needs to have some shadows. And so in order to really light this up, I want to make sure that I can see my entire pop-up view because I'm going to be placing some lights in this scene. And when I put the lights in there, you know, I don't want it to totally blow something out. I mean, I'm going to have some bright spots and dark spots. That's the whole point about the whole lighting thing. It's atmospheric. And I'm going to do that by going New and adding in a light. Now, personally, I'm going to be using point lights. You can use whatever kind of light you want. Realistically, in this assignment, pretty much a point or a spotlight would be your choice. The key, though, is that I do want to make sure it's casting shadows. And I don't need to necessarily worry about the adjustment. Right now, if the intensity is too big, like if you put too many lights in there, yeah, you might have some hot spots, but hot spots, you know, they're really to taste. Pretty much, I'm just going to click OK. Now, when I add the light in there, everything's going to all of a sudden get dark. Why? Because as soon as you add a light into a scene, and I'll zoom in just a little bit so you can see this a little bit better. By the way, I'm holding the space bar down to rearrange. As long as you remember to turn all of the cast shadows on, you get the ability to move your light around and you can see how it affects your 3D layers. And if this was the 80s, you can call it your totally bitchin' shadows. Now, I don't see any hot spots yet. It's actually got really dingy though, so I'm thinking to myself, well, I could turn up the intensity, or I could just add a second light. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to right click and say New Light. And when I load in the second light, point light number 2, going to go ahead and say OK. It's going to get brighter. How brighter? Well, it's really kind of up to you. Where should you place the lights? Well, actually, before I get too far, start playing around with the lights, I'm going to lock all of my layers down except for my lights because I'm going to start moving some things around and I don't want to move things around too much. So the thing with the point light is I'm using the X, Y, and Z controls to move things around. And this is, again, like I kind of mentioned earlier, going to be strictly to taste. When I say you'll get some hot spots, if we change the view to the active camera, you will find that there will be some pictures that will be overly bright. You may not like some of the shadows. You may get some things that look like they have shadows on top of each other. Like I've got a weird looking shadow coming off on my picture of the church that's right in the middle. And that is something that you can hold the spacebar down and kind of shuffle your entire scene a little bit to the left and right for the view and kind of be looking for hot spots, and then just kind of adjust your picture as it is. Where is this shadow coming from that's sitting right there? Well, looking at it from custom view number 1, by the way, I changed to custom view number 1. Weird looking shadow. Yeah, I don't like it. I don't like it at all. What can I do around to fix it? Well, I can move things. I could take this light and move them around. I could take the layer that I have locked down and I can move that around. I could probably, I think to myself, maybe I could add another light to counter that shadow if I wanted to. Adding 3 lights, possibility. I could pull this light away, and if I can grab this is one of my annoying things about After Effects. I could try and raise it up to minimize the shadows. The taller that the light is, the less the shadow is going to be. And I can maybe adjust it so that it is not quite giving me the shadow on my church ruins. And that might be actually better for me. I'll go ahead and take a quick peek at the active camera. And I'm pretty happy with that. I'm okay with a little shadow because I want there to be shadows. Just like I'm okay if something is slightly off the ground. You'll see that these priory ruins, that my cursor is over right next to the right of the garbage can, it's kind of floating off the ground a little bit. Okay, so I know that's pick 7, so if I wanted to adjust that, I'm just going to press the P button in position, and I'm just going to lower it down just a little teeny bit. I do want to make sure I don't lower it down too far because I don't want it to be going through the floor. Personally, if that's your taste, if you want things to pop up through the floor, then that would be okay. But for me, not so much. This is a little cluttered too. I might want to shrink down a few of these pictures because I've got the picture here of this is picture number 3 that I have of this really cool bench that's sitting in front of a cemetery. I might want to shrink that down just a little bit more. Okay, and when I shrink it down just a little bit more, I also might want to lower it down just a little bit more. And when I do that, I can get a little more front, foreground, and background. Because right now it's looking a little flat. Everything is kind of the same size. So I'm going to do the exact same thing with picture number 5, and after I unlock that one, and getting that adjustment in terms of adjusting the scale and adjusting the position is part of doing the whole pop-up thing. I mean, it's just something that you're going to have to kind of rearrange stuff, and you want to do this in a 3D view. And again, while you're working, you can hold the space bar down and go left to right. All right. And you get this entire tabletop scene up looking how you want. And then what we're going to do is we are going to adjust or throw in the camera. And just as one last thing, it's always a good idea to scrub through your timeline after you adjusted the lights. Now I adjusted the lights, by the way, when my timeline was sitting at about 19, so everything was standing up. But, hey, it's completely going to be to taste. Just don't blow something out too much. So the camera is the last component, and that is actually going to be something that uses another composition. We're not going to put a camera in this scene. I mean, I suppose you could put a camera in this scene, and yeah, that's not really going to give you very good control over cropping. See, we got a lot of headroom going on in here. I zoomed out in case you're wondering. And so what we need to do is we need to kind of control our composition. And in order to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to set up a high definition composition. And that's what we're going to put the camera in. Technically, it's not going to be a real 3D camera. What? Yeah. We're going to use an active still camera and we're going to move a scene. It's going to be like moving scenery. What? Yeah, quit making the high-pitched noise. It's the sound of like the, submarine. What? Okay, maybe that's my car alarm. Anyway, I'm going to do right-click and go New Composition, and I'm going to call this one Final. And when I do that one Final, it's going to be my 20-second high definition, and I'm going to click OK. What I'm going to do with Final is I'm going to place just one element in it. The element that I'm going to place in it happens to be the desktop or my England castle scene. That's what's going to go in it. It is going to be just drugged down. Boop. And when I do that, it does. You're thinking to yourself, it looks like it doesn't fit at all. Well, I got to make sure that it's a 3D layer, so I definitely want to turn it on. I definitely probably might want to see it all, and you might see parts of it if you scrub, and the parts that you'll see are going to be like there's something maybe just poking up. Okay, so well, how do you adjust this to do some cropping, and how does the camera work? Well, what we're doing is we're actually not going to load in a 3D camera. Well, we do have a 3D camera because it's a 3D layer, but we're actually not loading in a separate camera that we're going to animate. What we are going to do here is we are going to take just this layer. I'm going to shrink it down so that it's going to be small, pretty dang small. See, like that? So you can see everything. And I am just going to do this with this layer. I am going to start on one side, and I'm just going to move the layer right across the screen like that. And that's going to be my animation. 2 keyframes, a beginning and an end. Oh, okay, but then I don't, but if the end, it doesn't show any table. Well, I haven't zoomed out so you can see how the motion is going to look. In fact, I could probably fill the screen up a little bit better so you can see this. That's how the screen motion is going to look. It's not going to stay zoomed out. Why? Because if it's zoomed out, it still has crappy headroom. See, look, I got all this space above it, and that's just really horrendous. By the way, here's something to make sure you do not do. Okay, we are only using this composition, the final, to do a small little side-to-side camera truck or a dolly, however you want to call it, and so you do not want to turn on collapse transformation here. Why? Because if you turn on collapse transformation, your shadows will all go away. Yeah, collapse transformations only work one level deep. You can't like collapse and then collapse and collapse. It doesn't work like that. So After Effects, yeah, can only keep track of so much. All right, so how would we actually do the animation? So what we do is we're going to zoom in and we're going to set a beginning position. And when I do that, I'm going to zoom in far enough so that I can kind of fill my screen up so that I got pretty decent headroom, my space up the top. And I'll start with the edge of my scene right there. And I have that set. Doesn't really matter where your timeline is at, really particularly when you set it, but I like to scrub to the end because that way I can see the elements that are standing up. So I guess it does kind of matter if you're worried about the height and you're worried about the headroom, which you probably should be. So I didn't put anything in the background. You are more than welcome to put something in the background. In fact, in this scene, this would be a good spot where you could toss in a background if you wanted to put something. I'm just going to go ahead and stick with the black because I'm absolutely okay with that. So how do you move it from side to side? Well, easy. You have a beginning position, and you move your timeline all the way down to the 20-second mark, and you just simply grab the England layer, and you can do it by using the position, or you can do it by grabbing it by hand. And I just changed the X value, and I drag this, just the X value, to the left. And when I do that, it's like I'm shuffling the entire table. Now, I don't want to go too far past the edge. I like to stop right at the edge. I don't want to go too far past the edge, because if I go too far, then what ends up is I lose my table. Oh, so I don't want to do that. So just like at the beginning, you kind of want to set your position. And if you need to move it up or down, yeah, that's it. And so setting that position, I am going to put that keyframe in there. So that's going to be my ending keyframe. I'm going to go back to the beginning, and I'm going to shuffle it back. Now, I probably could have put the keyframe in there before I even shuffled. I know, but I wanted to explain to you about the edges before I did the... Yeah, okay, I went out of order. Life goes on. But at this point, what you do is you hit play. Because what you've got is you've got in this composition the shadows happening because you did not collapse the transformations in this one. The animation is going to play really, really slow on mine because it's going through some... I'm recording this on my computer, and so it's playing really, 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 really slow. But as long as you have enough RAM in your machine, eventually it will, well, pre-render itself out, and it'll play back at real-time speed. And I'm thinking I'm pretty happy with this. It's a short little 20-second animation, and probably like the first one I did a little bit better because I think the Camden lock got squished kind of at the end. Yeah, it's kind of buried there. So I think the one that was at the beginning of the lecture is better. Anyway, so have fun on your projects.